Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to some of you. We'd like to begin by welcoming all of our delegates and our panelists to our virtual event titled Advancing the Gaming Industry Through Diversity and Inclusion. We'd like to thank everyone who took the time to register. We really could not have hoped for a better response, and we're very gratified indeed. My name is Akikumi Akinola. My friends call me AK. I will be moderating this event and hopefully facilitating a smooth navigational experience for all our panelists. And before we kick off with speaker intros, here's a few cliff notes on the subject of advancing the gaming industry through D&I, the topic we're gathered here to discuss and learn about. The gaming industry is going through a revival and is predicted to soar within the next few years, with new opportunities for business and entertainment easily visible on the horizon. According to a 2020 Grand View research report, the global online gambling market was valued at $53.7 billion in 2019 and is expected to grow at an annual rate of 11.5% through from 2020 to 2027. And this event will be examining the ways in which D&I can advance the gaming industry and how many of these opportunities are open to the diverse talent in the macro environment, and whether the industry's diversity composition truly represents the spectrum of gamers, patrons, and customers who make it a multi-billion-dollar behemoth. We're also hoping that the discourse will trigger our collective imagination and ideation on what more could be achieved when DI is core to everything that the business does: better risk management, growth in reputational capital, and delivering increased rewards. Now, on to housekeeping and hygiene. Quite simple. We encourage delegates to drop any questions they may have into the Q&A box. Our panelists will be delighted to answer any questions in the last segment of the Q&A, if time permits. And panelists are encouraged to keep their answers within a lower and upper limit of 3 minutes and 30 seconds to 4 minutes. And we are also very happy to make the following informational resources available to interested delegates via email. We have the Diversio Inclusion White Paper provided by Diversio, Rubrik Talents Services Brochure provided by Rubrik, and of course the All Indexed Annual Report 2019. And so now I'd like to cede the floor to our panelists and ask each of you to give us a 10-second bio before we formally kick off. We welcome you to self-identify with your pronouns should you choose to. Any panelist speaking from Canada is welcome to offer a land acknowledgement before proceeding with introduction. So the introductions will be done alphabetically and I will guide you through. And I'm going to ask that Harvey Badala starts with introduction. Thank you.
Hi there, everyone. My name's Harvinder Badala, also known as Harvey. So I'm the HR manager at FSB. So I'm really excited to join this panel. And I've been at FSB for 7 months now, so I've got some exciting news to share with yourselves on the panel.
Thank you. Sunil?
Yes, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Sunil Jindal, UK Country Head at Diversio. My pronouns are he/him, and I'll be talking to you very shortly about the use of data, metrics, and technology to drive and advance DE&I.
Thank you so much, Sunil. Kelly?
Thanks, AK. I'm Kelly Keane. I'm the co-founder of All In Diversity Project. Really great to be here on this panel of global superstars talking about DEI. Thanks.
Fantastic. T?
That's me. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I am Tianda Kerr. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I am in Ontario. So I would like to begin by acknowledging that my work and where I live takes place on traditional Indigenous territories here in Ontario, Canada. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to meet and work on these lands. I've been in the gaming industry since 1994 and have been with OLG for the past 22 years. Currently, I am the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. That's me in a nutshell. Back over to you, AK. Thank you.
Thank you so much, T. Robin, please.
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Robin Mcdonald, co-founder and managing partner of Rubrik Talent. I've spent the better part of the last decade helping young technologists into fantastic careers, and that's why we set up Rubrik Talent to support the iGaming industry with young digital skills and fill the digital skills gap. Pronouns, he, him, his, and look forward to a very lively conversation.
Thank you so much. And now my lovely Tina.
Thank you very much, AK. My name's Christina Thacker-Rankin. I've been in the industry about 30 odd years, sportsbook trader, ops director, IT, and currently Kelly's co-conspirator as co-founder of the All in Diversity project. Thank you very much for having us, and like everybody else, looking forward to a great conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. So Tina, alphabetically speaking, you were the last to introduce yourself, but you are officially our first speaker today, and you now have the dais.
I share my screen. And if I can just ask AK for you to confirm you can see this. We good to go? You can hear me? All good?
Yeah, we can hear you, Tina.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, AK. Okay, so let's kick on, because literally and metaphorically speaking, time is not on our side. We are the All in Diversity project. We are about the business case for diversity. It is the right thing to do, but that typically is not why businesses look at D&I. Why now? Very simple reasons. The biggest drivers of social and cultural change are events. War historically has seen women come into the workplace. Technology has been a huge driver for social, leisure, and various workplace changes. Economic boom and bust has seen considerable changes. Boom brings with it migration, bust, less so. The other big factor is peace, population boom. And right now, we are on the cusp of the biggest generation this planet has ever seen, the tail end of the millennials and the Gen Z. Currently, they form around 50% of the global workplace. They are the most ethnical and racially diverse group ever. They want to make a difference with their work. They have different expectations, different aspirations to the generations before them. And in 10 years' time, they will form the majority of employees across the world. 93% of Gen Z says a company's impact on society will determine their decision to work there. Almost 50% are willing to take a pay cut to work for a company that supports their values and their beliefs. For this particular generation, diversity, equality, and inclusion will be an expectation, not an aspiration. This is what their world looks like and how they see things. They are into equality. They are not into stereotypes. They are not into labels. They are socially, ethically, morally responsible, and they are not afraid to tell the world what they think. This is how our world looks. Very masculine, slightly misogynistic, a little bit stuck in the olden days. We very quickly need to pivot from this to this. If we don't, we are not going to be able to attract the investors, the employees, or the customers of tomorrow. So how do we start to change our world? Kelly's going to tell you how.
Thanks, Tina. Yes, as Tina said in the beginning, we are the All in Diversity Project, and the All in Diversity Project is a nonprofit organization working to push an entire industry forward when it comes to DEI. And we do that by making it commercially relevant and making it an imperative for businesses and giving them the tools to do so. The first and key initiative that we engage in is the All Index. It's a global survey that we engage in that is meant to give a level of measurability to what companies are doing in DEI, not just in their demographics, but in their workplace practice and policy. Here is a quick view of some of the data we collect. Clearly, this is about the tech industry. We do collect data globally on the tech industry. as it pertains to demographics, but also what's happening in terms of practice and policy, how they're recruiting, how they're retaining. And as you can see, the pull-out box in the front of the screen is our 2019 score. And you can see that GVC, which was GVC back then, which is now Entain, scored #1. A year before that, they were quite far down the list, actually. And because they had put the business best practices to work, you now see that they have a female CEO. You now see that they were just bid for 22 billion, I think, was the last number I saw. So it's working. In terms of things that we look at people within the workforce. We are looking at how DEI affects product and the products that we're using within our industry and how that plays, as well as practices, not just a diversity policy, but really about how we're recruiting, how we're retaining, how we're developing our people within this space. And then we offer tools back based on that data. So we do a lot of work with individual companies based on the data we collect. We do audits, we do risk assessments, we do loads of training and learning, as well as accountability within those companies. So in order to sort of wrap this up and make it full circle, I wanted to say, All in Diversity Project might be new to some of you who are hearing it. We are an industry-led nonprofit. Everything that we do goes back into the industry to help us be better. So for those of you who this is an introduction to, if you want to learn more, if you want to start your DEI journey within the space, please do get in touch. There's a number of different things we can do for, a limited amount of you that come. So thank you very much. And thank you to Diversio and Rubik for putting this together. This is really great. Back to you, AK.
Thank you so much for that brilliant presentation. I think one of the things that struck me the most, what Tina said, the biggest drivers of social and cultural change are events, which is so true, resoundingly so. And, if a picture paints 1,000 words, I think that, some of the imagery and visuals that we saw in your deck spoke 3,000, quite frankly, just in terms of the toxic masculinity that still pervades the industry today. Now, the data and the infographics that you projected many inconvenient and inequitable truths about the gaming industry. And speaking of data, I'd like to turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Sunil, to demonstrate how data can be collected and synthesized for DEI impact. Sunil?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, AK, and thank you, Kelly and Tina, for an awesome keynote and really got goosebumps down my back, that's for sure. Just briefly, Diversio founded March 2018. We are headquartered in Toronto, Canada. We have regional offices in the US and the UK with a satellite office in Germany. Over the last 3.5 years, we have grown our presence and impact to cover over 100+ clients. And we've done that through the platform, which I'm about to show you. If you remember, part of the invitation that you received was how to use data, technology, and metrics to advance D&I at pace. So rather than me talking, let me do some showing and share with you how we do that on behalf of our clients. If I may share the screen. Great. AK, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what you're seeing here is the Diversio Workforce Dashboard. One of our founding principles, if you will, is that what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. So, and we've heard it already from Tina and Kelly, the importance of data and the importance of measurement. How our product starts is that we start with a survey. Our survey is 17 questions, takes about 4 minutes to complete or less. And typically, we get about 80 to 85% engagement rates when we engage businesses and they work with us. What we do, we capture gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and disability, including mental health, which we've added over the last 18 months. What we also do, we capture where the individual sits within the organization, role, level, department, region. I think it's been said, diversity as a metric, as a set of measures, is relatively easy to define. Where things get super interesting is when you start to look at inclusion. So Diversio have worked with academic institutions and strategic advisors globally to create a definition for inclusion. And that is, as you see here, in our 6-part inclusion framework, which consists of inclusive culture, do I feel valued? Fair management, is manager fair and equitable with me in my organization? Career development, am I getting the feedback in order to develop my career? Workplace flexibility, pretty self-explanatory, but do I have the working practices to allow me to work how I would like to work? Workplace safety, is the environment free of any harassment, physical, sexual, or emotional? And the only objective measure here is their diversity in the recruitment and hiring within the organization, as seen by looking at the last 12 months of individuals onboarded into the organization. What we do with this data is we help you understand where you're doing well and where you're not doing so well. And a critical part, and certainly for maybe yourselves as an industry, is benchmarking you. Our proprietary benchmark database consists of 21,000 companies across 100 countries. So you're able to benchmark you against your industry. As we move further from the home view of your organization, we're able to do some really granular analytics. For example, helping you understand the diversity breakdown within your organization by the core data set. Also, we help you see what we call the pipeline view. As you probably know, some organizations may seem diverse from the outside, but that diversity may be centered at the more junior levels within the organization. Through the pipeline view, we can help you see where, in this instance, women are progressing to the vice president level, but not getting to the executive level, highlighting a systemic issue / barrier to that particular group. And you can compare and contrast that with your different groups to see the level of diversity and progression within the organization. We also look at inclusion in a very unique way, whereby we help you identify what is known as the dominant group within the organization. Tina and Kelly articulated it very well within the industry. The dominant group in most organizations, both sides of the pond, is a white, male, heterosexual without a disability. What we're doing here, we're comparing and contrasting their experience with the non-dominant group, looking for two things. One, where all groups need to be leveled up because their scores are relatively low, or where there are big deltas between any two particular groups. Where there's a delta, there's arguably a systemic issue / barrier within the organization. And we start to get really granular with the heat maps, because then you can start to look by department. So in this example, what you're seeing is that HR as an organizational function within the business is scoring pretty low across some core metrics. So you now get into the domain where if you have a D&I committee or a D&I executive or somebody in charge of D&I within the organization, they can start to look at the data and start to set specific targets. So now you move into the realms of moving beyond diversity goals and diversity targets, and you start to set inclusion goals and inclusion targets. I think Tina said it brilliantly well. Your future workforce demand inclusion. It's a non-negotiable. We go even further, whereby we provide what we call intersectionality analysis, where you're able to compare and contrast the experience of any two particular groups. So, for example, look at the experience of white men within the organization with the experience of women of color. What you're looking for here, when the graphic shows itself, are the actual deltas. Because where there's a delta, again, is highlighting a systemic issue / barrier to inclusion for these particular groups. We encourage businesses to survey. Large organizations typically once a year, smaller organizations maybe multiple times within the year. But this is not a one-stop activity. It's something that you need to commit to as part of a 3-year, 5-year plan, and that you're constantly always looking to improve yourself from a DE&I perspective. I mentioned earlier that our survey is 17 questions. A lot of feedback we get is that all? My engagement survey is about 80 questions. How do you get 17 questions? And how do you get all this analysis and insight? Well, this free text question that we have in our survey gives us a tremendous amount of insight on your behalf. We use natural language processing, so back to the technology piece. These algorithms which are trained to look for sentiment within the organization, pulling out specific pain points. These pain points are arguably your indicators to your heat maps, explaining why you have what you have. So you're getting the lived experience, the coded patterns of behavior, from your employees, which is, again, as Tia and Kelly said earlier, is really, really important. Once we have done this analysis for you, what we're able to do is package that all up and provide all of that insight into our recommendations engine. Our recommendation engine consists of 1,200 plus solutions. Again, it's a proprietary recommendation engine. What we did, we systematically scraped every single D&I policy that we knew had improved D&I within an organizational context. And then we went further, ranked and classified every single one, the size of the solution, whether it was academically validated, and the actual impact. Now, no organization is unlikely to take on 18 programs. For us at Diversio, this is about tactical improvements. There aren't necessarily any silver bullets, but the intent to move forward with tactical improvements is really key here. So we would work with you as an organization, help you identify the top 3 to 5 recommendations that will drive the most amount of change. For each of the recommendations, we provide resources, toolkits, practices, and frameworks to get you started. The really great thing here is that for each of the recommendations, we can pinpoint for you the department that this recommendation is going to impact, the KPI, the region, the level, the target group, and the pain point. All of a sudden, a subject like DE&I, which can be considered by some to be fluffy, if I can use such a word, and maybe feel a little bit like throwing spaghetti against a wall and hoping it will stick. Now you've got specific solutions to specific pain points, and you know exactly where it's going to make a difference. So all of a sudden, that business case, the need for, you can start to quantify, you can start to measure, you can start to track. As I said right at the beginning, everything is predicated on our inclusion score. Should you as an organization choose to work with us, we then issue what we call our certification seal. The certification seal is a really critical signal, again, to those stakeholder groups that Tina and Kelly alluded to, your employees, your stakeholders, your partners in what you do. Because it says 3 things. Firstly, that you are proactively measuring and tracking diversity and inclusion at all levels. Secondly, that you're proactively identifying systemic issues and barriers that's preventing true inclusion. And thirdly, that you're putting programs and policies in place that will drive inclusion and diversity and inclusion within your organization. This inclusion score, I think, just to sort of give you an idea of how some of our clients have treated the inclusion score, we have one client that has taken the inclusion score and taken the executive bonus pay and attributed 8% of the bonus payout based on driving that inclusion score. That tells you the level of commitment. When this data really lands and it really makes sense, the impact it can have. Further, that organization is now using that data in its SEC filings. That's when you know this has resonated. You know, the business case solved, done. And in fact, the organization I'm thinking about had some real challenges during the BLM initial 6-7 months around racism within the organization. They've turned that around. So this is super fast, super elegant, super slick use of data, technology, and analytics to advance D&I in your organizations.
Thank you so much, Sunil. It's fascinating what you said about how, we're actually able to move diversity and inclusion from, fluffy subjective status and pushing it closer and closer to an exact science through the use of data. So I just think that is tremendous. I think most would agree. Now, Tionda, I know that OLG has actually utilized Diversio's product to advance EDI across its departments and functions. How has using the product supported your EDI strategy at OLG?
Of course, I'd love to answer that. So thanks, AK and Sunil, that was an amazing presentation, and it just reiterated what we need to be doing. We're actually right in the middle of our second survey with our organization, so it's good to be reminded all the great things that are going to come out of the survey when we close next week. And if there are any OLGers on the call, please do your census if you haven't done so already. So our equity, diversity, and inclusion strategy is supported specifically with 5 pillars. We, of course, want to build and obviously sustain a diverse talent pool that is representative of our community. Tone from the top leadership is another pillar, because we need our leaders on board when talking about ED&I. And we want to create naturally that inclusive environment where folks have a sense of belonging. And then we want to be able to, of course, introduce equity into our program and policy development. And then we want to, our 5th pillar is we want to have brand building, which is basically partnering with our communities to actually advance this conversation. The Diversio AI, as Sunil so wonderfully presented, it helps us shape the narrative that underwrites those pillars. For example, we want to build a diverse talent pool, right? And so the demographic data is there at all levels to show us where, in fact, we need to sort of close the gaps. And I know that sounds really simple, like, hiring for diversity, but it is very impactful when you see the numbers and see where the gaps are and know when you have to fill in where you want to focus your work. It's important to of course, factor in inclusion. This panel has heard me say it before, but it makes no sense to me why you're hiring for diversity if you don't have that inclusive culture. So it's really, really important to understand inclusion in the organization. And so Diversio has helped us do that. And then, one of the solutions that Sunil mentioned in his presentation that comes up with Diversio is in fact rolling out here at OLG. For us, for an inclusive culture, one of the things was that our folks felt that they didn't have access to networks. And so we are launching our formal mentoring program next month. These are the things that the Diversio AI gives us to advance the conversation here at OLG. And what I love also about how the Diversio tool supports our pillars is that, in fact, the AI actively listens for us. So that commentary along with the data gives us a narrative we need to sort of push through the work and to identify where we can move forward. And so I really, really enjoy that piece of it. I also like the fact too, it allows us, being a fairly large organization, to cut the data in a more digestible way, like across divisions, for example, and divisional leaders can do their own work, look at the data specific to their division because they know their divisions best, and sort of close those gaps as well within each division. And lastly, I'd like to say, as leaders in gaming, we can influence our partners, our stakeholders, to forge this community forward, which is basically our fifth pillar in our strategy. It's at the core of who we are as a gaming organization to deliver fun entertainment in a responsible way. So to sustain that business, we've got to work within that gaming community and hold each other accountable in terms of our supplier diversity, our hiring for representation, and how we're impacting lives at the end of the day. And so honestly, the world has changed. We need to recognize that the gaming impact is global and the globe is quite diverse. And we need to change the way that we hire, how we develop our folks. And basically, we need to be able to do that in order to produce the product for our very diverse customers. Back over to you, AK.
Thank you so much, Tionda. That was brilliantly spoken. And I love what you said about how diversity and inclusion really have to go in tandem, hand in hand. It's a tandem bicycle. You can't have one without the other. I think one of my favorite expressions is, diversity's been invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance, and then, belonging is the freedom to dance like no one's watching. So I love that, and thank you for spotlighting that in this discourse. Robin, now a key focus of Rubik Talent is to bridge the digital skills gap by mining diverse talent and creating representation for diverse talent in the iGaming sector. Talk to us about why you think diversity is so crucial to filling the skills deficit. Why does it have to come from a diverse cohort of new hires?
Lovely, thank you very much, JK. Fantastic question, and I do love that quote. And I have been caught dancing on my own quite before. And so to to start to answer your question, we have to understand, I think, what the digital skills gap actually is. And this week I saw on the news in the UK, as I sit here in London, that there's 1 million job vacancies across the economy, of which there are 30,000 in the tech industry. If you look across Europe, there's 1 million job vacancies in technology. And if you look towards the United States and Canada, you see similar numbers. And you have to ask why that is. And part of that reason is as a result of the pandemic and iGaming specifically moving more from land-based to digital, and tech teams being built at extraordinary speed, faster than they ever have before. And so 15 years ago when we talked about how fast the dot-com bubble was moving, that today it's even more true that tech teams have to be built quickly, but there's simply not enough talent in order to do so. So that's where Rubik Talent comes in, because what we're here to do is to help organizations adopt diverse and inclusive hiring practices at the grassroots and the junior level by providing young people with the skills needed in order to embed them into small, fast growing or enterprise level clients where they've not considered hiring young people previously. And the way we do that is through our academy model. To get to the heart of your question is why or how do you bring on diverse people? We have access through student-founded organizations and charities to a diverse population that organizations that we're talking to, our clients, have been approached before and talked to about either iGaming or technology. And so what we do is we reach an audience that the iGaming community hasn't reached out to before. And this is primarily underrepresented groups right across the spectrum. We then train people in our academy through 3 pillars of education, which include professional skills, industry-specific skills across iGaming, and full stack software development, data engineering, UX, UI, and other disciplines across the software development lifecycle. And the net results of doing that through our bootcamp is that I talk to CTOs, I talk to talent acquisition teams, I talk to HR managers, and we help to support younger people into industry faster and help them grow a sustainable tech team through long-term results in retention than they have done previously. And so I often talk to people who say, I can only hire senior or mid-level software developers. And really, you're missing a trick. You're missing a massive trick, because there's a huge population out there of people from diverse backgrounds who are keen on technology, but don't necessarily have the skills presently in order to become a full stack software developer from day one. And so what we do at Rubik is we educate and upskill these people so that they can join fast-growing companies like FSB, and I've been working closely with Harvey on this over the last few months to help them embed junior skills from the outset. And that's the answer, or at least our little part of filling that digital skills gap and providing the iGaming industry with access to people that they've not had previously. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much, Robin. Yeah, it answered my question and then some. And so now over to you, Harvey, because, you know, Robin's spoken so eloquently about part of Rubik Talent's value proposition. And so we'd like to hear from you about FSB's partnership with Rubik. From your perspective as a gatekeeper, as an HR professional who is actually driving the growth in diverse talent, why is this partnership important? And should there be more of such partnerships and initiatives happening across the sector?
So just before I talk about the partnership with Rubik, I want to touch upon my journey into the sector and with FSB. So I've never worked in the gaming sector or gambling sector before. So, but from the outside looking in, I always knew diversity is a big challenge. I think it's an obvious point to make, or an obvious assumption to make. So I thought that's going to be a real challenge coming into FSB as a HR manager, and really pitched that, because from my experience in other organisations I work in other sectors, HR really have to push that agenda and get that buy-in from senior management. And sometimes senior management just see it as a tick box exercise, or they just want HR to run with it. What was refreshing when I joined FSB was that I didn't have to do any of that. The CTO and our founder, Sam Lawrence, actually came to myself pretty much from the beginning of when I joined in March and said, this is a great initiative. I would love to run it as part for FSB. And he empowered me to build that momentum and get the program going. So that was half the challenge already won for me. So that was quite easy peasy. Next challenge was finding a partner to work with. And again, I've worked with a lot of agencies where they talk about equality and diversity. They really promote it, but there's no substance behind it. There's no real meaning behind it. So when I came across Robin and Rubik's, I was a little bit dubious and a little bit suspicious about what their actual what they were offering. And I apologised afterwards, but I didn't make no apologies at the time when I was liaising with Robin, in terms of I did give them a real good grilling to find out, what is Rubik's about, what are their true values, what is their mission. And I'm pleased to say they were able to, prove all my suspicions and put those, I was able to arrest it to bed, really. And since working with Rubik's, they've, really demonstrated that they've got some real key talent, and they really truly mean what they say, what they truly mean, what they want to deliver, which is great talent from a diverse workforce, starting from a younger generation. And the talent that we've onboarded so far has been fantastic. I've been really pleased with the partnership so far, and we're hoping that we can just build that momentum going forward. In terms of your second part of your question about why this partnership is important, again, it's just about creating opportunities. And if I think back to my career when I first started, all I wanted was that opportunity, and I had to knock on a lot of doors, and I had to face a lot of rejections because there's probably people assuming that because of my young age I couldn't work in keep up with the pace and the culture of the company and so on. So what I as a HR professional could do is use my position of empowerment to open those opportunities, and I think a lot of organizations should do the same. And it's about not being fearful of making that investment. And FSB, I'm not afraid of making that investment. And look, if we have talent come join us and then they leave as part of their career development, we won't hold grudges with that, because we're hoping that people, those graduates or those joiners that have joined us will feel that look back at their time at FSB and say FSB was the company that gave me the opportunity, and I'm thankful for that. And that'll help with the whole employer branding and the employee engagement, and hopefully that'll bring in the next cohort and so on, and really truly be a testament to the model we've partnered up with Rubik's.
Thank you so much, Harvey. Thank you very much indeed. Now, it's always great as a moderator when you look in the Q&A chat box and see a bunch of brilliant questions as opposed to hearing the sound of crickets. So I'm really happy that, we have some great questions here for our panelists. I'm going to take the very first one from Ben Cronin, and I'm going to throw this open to the women on the dais. Ben is asking, women tend to drop out of business in their early 30s to have children. This is reflected in lower representation in more senior roles. How can we support them to get them back into the office? And so whichever one of you wants to answer first, and maybe one of the men wants to chirp in after all three ladies have actually said something. Kelly, go on, Kelly.
Okay. I think the first sentence of that question, women tend to drop out, is very assumptive. And I think it's great because we have a lot of people on this call who are actually measuring what's happening. And I'll tell you a little story. And my point is, make sure, and that for a fact before you make that assumption, because I think that can cause a lot of problems if you assume that people are just leaving because not coming back just because they're built to have children. We work with Caesars in Las Vegas, Caesars Global, all over the world, and they undertook a study with us and with the Billie Jean King Foundation to identify where the glass ceilings were within their 10,000, 20,000 person organization, because they could not figure out why that sort of mid-senior level women 25 to 35 weren't progressing. And what they found was that there was no opportunities for them internally. They made the same assumption, right? We're biologically programmed. The women are going, they're just not coming back because they need X amount of years to take care of their kids. But what they found when they looked at the data was that there were no opportunities when they got back. And so, or when they were planning to leave. So they looked for opportunities elsewhere, obviously. If you have a amount of time you want to go back to work, these women were going into other roles and taking that opportunity to look for other roles in other places, which, as we all know, costs a lot of money, and it's not what you want to do. You spend a lot of time developing people. We in the gaming industry, it's very hard to get people to work for us. We all know that, male or female, like any color, any socioeconomic background. If we get them, let's keep them. And let's really try and understand what those particular needs are and be inclusive in how we can keep them and what that ecosystem is that is going to keep them. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I'd love to hear from Tionda. I'd love to hear from Tina on this.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Well said, Kelly. I do think that in Ontario, we do see the women leaving our organization. But I think at OLG we do very well is offer that flexible work environment. And you can see that also through Diversio data when you take the survey. And you have to make sure and have that flexible opportunity to give women what they need in the workplace, whether that is leaving early for caregiving, but then logging back on after, they've picked up the kid from school. And the reason why I use that example, because that's me. There's certain tasks that are available to us. And a company needs to support that in their brand to encourage women to come. And especially in the gaming industry, we have to be able to ensure that we have that inclusive environment so that women feel safe, comfortable to say, listen, I got to go pick up my kid. This is what I'm going to need. And if we sort of redefine how work is being measured as industry leaders, then you'll find that we can solve that problem rather quickly if women are struggling to come into the industry. That's my 2 cents further to what Kelly said.
Thank you so much, Tionda. Tina, I'd love to hear from you too.
Well, I'm going to kind of turn it slightly on its head. Firstly, that statement, women tend to drop out of business in their early 30s, is probably one of the challenges and one of the reasons we're here today. Aside of the fact that it's an assumption, it is a legacy assumption. And what I mean by that is we're now starting to see with the younger generation, paternity leave. And what we're now finding is that young men who are taking time away from business to be a new father are now starting to experience what young mothers have experienced for years, a sense of isolation, a sense of being away from the business, coming back and finding everything's new. Their place within the business has been taken over by somebody else. So the question shouldn't be, what do we do to get more young women or mothers back into the office? The question should be, what should we be doing to ensure we retain all new parents going forward? Because it's not just maternity leave you have to worry about. It is now paternity leave and the general spectrum of parental leave. If you focus only on women, then pretty much you're replacing one problem with another.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tina. So, syntax and question phrasing aside, I do want to say thank you, Ben, for that question, because it did trigger a lot of, great insights and a lot of instructive answers and opinions. So thank you very much indeed. I have a question from an anonymous attendee. I will throw this open to any of the panelists, which is, what are your visions for changes that need to happen in the gaming industry for the next 5 years? And I know this is, almost entirely what the All-In project is premised on, changes, near-term to medium-term to long-term changes that need to happen. But I'd like to throw this open to any of the panelists. What is on your vision board within the next 5 years for the gaming industry? Or I'll have to pick someone.
I'll say something. I think we've learned a lot over the last 5 years. If we look back, I think, if we look at practice and policy, or if we look at what we're doing around gender and developing women into the space, I'd really like to take those principles and be able to collaborate with businesses across the world on those principles to extend it out to other underrepresented groups. I would like to see us talking more about other underrepresented groups within our business, like disability, like race and ethnicity, like socioeconomic background, and really important that we have barely begun to talk about is the neurodiversity, right? So I would like to see a much broader topic of diversity inclusion that's not just focused on gender, that's really focused on where are the barriers, where are we keeping ourselves back from having the best talent?
If I could jump in there as well, and to extend, I think, the comments from the previous question, there are certainly the vision that people should be able to reskill into and upskill into new roles as they get older. And this is especially true in our field, where we're looking at people who may have done an English degree initially, and then 5 years later they find out, oh, I've got a real passion for technology, and I'm going to do a coding course in my spare time and upskill myself to the point where I can be considered in a technology team, and my skills will actually become really useful. So I think especially, and this is true not just via gaming, but right across all different industries, is that the entire population is going to have to, in some ways, upskill and reskill to have those things, those skills available at their disposal, at their hand, in order to be beneficial for economic development.
Thank you so much, Robin. And now I have a question which is specific to Tionda, but I'd actually like anyone else to speak to it. So the question, after Tionda is answered, of course, is Tionda, how has leadership embraced DEI at OLG? And beyond that, perhaps you could speak to why leadership buy-in is so important from the onset, kind of DEI strategy rollout.
100%. If you don't have that buy-in right from the top, it's going to fail, guaranteed, right? Our leaders need to be brought into the conversation, included into the conversation, see themselves into the conversation, and then get work done. We've been very fortunate at OLG under our leadership of Duncan Hannay, our president and CEO, who has encouraged his ELT to basically hold themselves accountable for our inclusion scores within our Diversio dashboard. And it's all a part of our performance and our performance review. This year, for the first time ever, our leaders have championed anti-racism training within the workplace and made it mandatory for all folks. And we can't do that if our leadership doesn't say, yes, it's important. Our leadership has pledged to abolish racism and to work with stakeholders and beyond to ensure that we're being an inclusive organization and what that means for their divisions. So I think I've answered it in two parts, but specifically our leaders are currently going through Indigenous cultural training. For example, our board is taking that. We're looking to roll that out as well through the rest of our leadership in an organization. It starts with education, right? Because you don't know what you don't know, and then when you know, you do better. So these are the steps that we are taking, and our leadership is we're very lucky to have gender parity across our executive leadership team, and we have a very diverse group of people leading this organization. So they've really taken a bite out of what it is that we want to have accomplished based on our business priorities, and we're holding ourselves accountable to get that done. So I hope that answers the question from the group, the attendee.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you very much indeed.
I was going to jump in, AK. I've been enrolled for about 10 months now, and I've had a number of conversations with CEOs, HR leaders, and investors. And it's with a heavy heart sometimes when I listen, because this isn't easy. I mean, Tionda just articulated a really great way that OLG have embraced this top down. The fear of saying the wrong thing, the fear of doing doing something that might backfire, the risk of somebody going AWOL and saying something discriminatory. There's a lot of pressure here. So I feel for organizations that are trying to get their head around this. But I think, Tina and Kelly said it brilliantly from a gaming sector perspective. And I think from a diversity perspective, working in the gaming sector and more broadly, it is about focus on the data. Because if you haven't got the data, you're kind of walking blind, really. And, you don't have to go overboard with reams and reams of data. You can get, the right data sets, the right insight that move you along the journey. This isn't something that's going to resolve itself, right? If it was an SAP transformational program where you just put SAP in, you've got a new ERP and it all works. It's not like that. So I feel for organizations here that may be trying to get their head around this, but I think if I can offer you a crumb of comfort, you're not alone. There are great organization industry bodies that you've heard from today that are here to support you.
Thank you so much, Sunil. I'm sorry, Harvey, please come in with your question.
I'd just like to talk about what I'm seeing from FSP, and I'll sort of touch upon how, the senior management team are fully engaged by the Equality and Diversity and Inclusion initiative, and it's about we recognise the industry needs to change, or us as an organisation needs to change. So that's clearly obvious. But we're willing to change. So if the industry is not willing to change, we at FSB will change. And just looking at the experience that I've seen firsthand with the cohort of graduates we brought in through the Rubik program, it was really refreshing to see our CEO, Dave McDowell, actually wanting to engage with the cohort and meet with them in the first week and so on, which not many organisations, a CEO would take their time out to meet with the new starters in organisation and graduates and make them feel welcome and so on. So I think for us, it's, you know, we recognise there's a lot of challenges to be made, but our senior leadership team are just really embracing it and they're really going to challenge, face the challenges ahead and so on.
Thank you so much, Harvey. Before I take Dylan Thompson's question, and yes, I am coming to you, Dylan, it's a great question. I just need to come back to you, Sunil, just for my edification, and I hope the edification of the other delegates. Why do you think the primordial and fundamental importance of data is still lost on quite a few of the leaders today in the 21st century? Because it does seem pretty obvious that it has to start with the data. God is in the data, as I like to say. It really is the first step. So why do you think we still need to do a lot of, you know, learning, unlearning, and relearning on the importance of data to make any kind of DEI impact?
Yeah, and I think it's a bit of a legacy, because I think I can't speak necessarily for the gaming sector because I'm not an expert in the sector, but there are experts on the call. That, you know, my corporate background, you had the employee engagement surveys, you know, which were 86 questions and took half an hour to complete, and it took 6 months to unravel it all. I've been on both sides, and somebody completed one and then had to analyze one. So I think that there is that legacy which is hampering organizations think just a little bit differently. And then, you know, diversity is quite, as we've talked about, it's quite easy to get your arms around, pretty much. Inclusion is incredibly difficult. And, you know, we have volunteered as Diversio, we've open sourced our methodology, and it's been used in multiple places, is to be able to define it. So I think, AK, to your question, it's, yes, it's data, but how do I define it? And that's what we've offered. And then with that definition, how can you metricize it? How can you make it quant and qual? Because you can get lots of qual, but how do you quantify this thing? And again, the All-In Index do a great job of quantifying as well. Does that answer the question, EK?
Very much indeed. Thank you, Sunil. Very instructive. Thank you. And now, you know, to Dylan's question, I wondered if any of you could speak to, and I'd like more than one answer on this, you know, how are these efforts actually, you know, helping to impact pay equity and minimize or eliminate the pay gaps that exist, you know, by bringing in, you know, a more diverse talent, you know, is that, you know, recruitment of a more diverse cohort commensurate with, you know, a closing of the pay gap, which is also, you know, part of the industry's cultural legacy?
Well, it is if you read the data and ensure that they're paid in that way, you know, because, you know, folks could still come into the gaming industry who are underrepresented and still get paid less. So you have to look at your data. Funny enough, we just did it for women here at OLG, and we were fairly on par, men versus women at OLG. So we were super excited about that. But we're going to slowly work on ethnic. But the key is to look at your data, see what you're paying your folks, and ensure that when you bring diversity in, representation in, that they're paid equally. And that's how that gap's going to close. So no nonsense about, you know, you're new and so you have to learn still and develop, et cetera, et cetera. You pay them equal pay for equal work. I mean, that's just my 2 cents. I could be wrong. Christina, I saw you laughing, so I'll throw it over to you.
I did. Well, firstly, your reaction was exactly my reaction. Much better articulated than me, however. For me, if you have a comprehensive D&I strategy that covers all the bases, people, policy, product, what you are doing is setting up a clear description for the role, the responsibilities, and a clear remuneration package. And that's all you need. Whoever is put in that position gets whatever the package that role is linked to. Nothing to do with gender, ethnicity, how long they've been there. If the skill set matches this piece of truth, which is a job description, that is what you're paying against. And if you are consistently applying it, any pay gap differential will just disappear.
Thank you so much, Tina. Thank you very much indeed. I have one more question. This is for the Diversio team. That would be Sunil. As to when you learn where the gaps are within the organization from the analytics, how do you ensure that the right actions are being taken to invoke real changes? Sunil?
I love that question. Whoever AA is, thank you for your great question today. Much appreciated. So this is where the technology comes in, right? This is the use of AI that is very smart in understanding the pain points and matching those pain points to specific recommendations, and then going that one stage further and saying, these recommendations, where do they actually impact? And then how can you track? Because when you resurvey, all being well, you're going to drive your inclusion score. And if you choose to survey over a certain cadence, you'll then get a direction of travel around whether you're making real change or not. So, this discussion around inclusion metrics becomes really, really critical in knowing if you are actually making real change. We have organizations that an inclusion score of about 80 something is great. We have organizations where an inclusion score of 50 something is not good. We have some organizations who are down around the early 30s, which is cause for concern, but it starts with the data. And then those changes you can see as you resurvey and you get the data through, you do the aggregation, you see that change incrementally improving.
Thank you very much indeed, Sunil. And by the way, AA stands for Anonymous Attendee, just FYI.
Oh, okay, thank you. I couldn't see that.
I thought you should know. But brilliant. Well, this has been riveting, really. I've learned more about the gaming industry in the last 1 hour than I have in a lifetime. I think that one thing that I've taken away from listening to all of you is the importance, the impact, and just the fact that certain things cannot be overstated. When we're having this discussion on DEI within the iGaming sector, within the gaming sector, the importance of data, the importance of leadership and leadership participation, how legacy assumptions can actually thwart the best intentions and plans and efforts. And of course, just lastly to what you said about pay equity, that really can be likened to just about any other sector. And I love the fact that, Tina actually posited a solution, just match the pay with the skills gap. And I just feel like that needs to be, with the skill set, and I just feel like that needs to be replicated, across the board from sector to sector, across borders as well. So absolutely brilliant. I feel like today we really have heard from some of the most knowledgeable people on the subject. We have heard from fountainheads, stalwarts, drivers and gatekeepers on the gaming sector, on the subject of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the importance of data to really shift the needle on where we're all trying to get to. So once again, I want to thank you all very much indeed. I would like to reiterate that once again, we have resources, informational resources available to you. If you have your emails and you've left them, we're very happy to provide you with resources from Diversio, our inclusion paper, the All Index Annual Report 2019, and the Rubik Talent Services brochure. And I'm going to see if I have one last question to take before we actually close officially. I don't think I do. I think we're very good here, unless, of course, I would also like to basically invite the panelists, being as we still do have a little bit of time to play with before we formally conclude, to just give us a parting message on what they've learned today. And what was your key takeaway from today? Just each one of you, tell me what your favorite part of today's experience was and how you're going to apply that as you go out into the world. I'll start with you, Sunil, because you're first on my screen.
I think my takeaway is understanding that the gaming sector is where it is. It's not unique in where it is, and it can learn a lot from other sectors, and there's a lot of sharing to be done, would be my takeaway. So share in and share out.
I love that. Thank you so much. Robin?
Thank you to Tina and Kelly as our keynotes today. My takeaway is certainly, I think, from them in that I think the having these discussions is something that didn't take place 15, 20 years ago in forums like this, certainly not least because of the technological advancements of Zoom and so forth, but the topic itself. And I think that the topic of diversity and inclusion within iGaming is moving forward. And we're thrilled at Rubik Talent to be part of that discussion.
Thank you very much indeed. Harvey?
So I'd like to thank all the panel members for sharing their thoughts. But I think the one thing that really stood out to myself was a presentation from Sunil and how data can help drive D&I initiatives, because we're so busy in our day jobs and so on. Sometimes, if you've got that data, that can help, make the whole agenda really stand out, and we find out where there are shortcomings and they need to be addressed. You don't really see it; it just flies by sometimes naturally.
Thank you so much. Tina, you're next on my screen.
I think listening to the kind of conversations, less so about data, but everything around it. Diversity and inclusion does not have to be complicated. It is about simply treating people with respect and rewarding them for what they do for you as a business. And if you can treat everybody in your business with respect and fairness and look past what they physically look like, you can go out there and you can say your biggest asset is your people. And all of the world's leaders who run successful organizations will tell you again and again, your most valuable asset is your people.
Tionda, please.
I don't know how I'm going after that. That's like a mic drop moment there, AK. But I do have to say that I absolutely 100% enjoyed your facilitating today. You are incredible, and I hope we can do this again. That was one of my favorite parts of today. And, it's about working together. Harvey and Robin had Harvey was questioning Robin's motive at the beginning, but through that conversation and patience, they have a great partnership, and that's what it is. It's about bringing this conversation to everyone, discussing it and finding solutions, and I think we can do it together. And you got to do it with some kindness, folks. Have some patience, be kind.
Absolutely, 100%. And may I just reciprocate by saying this has been one of the most pleasurable moderating experiences I've ever had. I think everyone spoke with such passion and such knowledge. And I think everything we've done today was governed by kindness and, a real need to understand and to create impact in our respective spaces. So this really has been an undiluted pleasure. I'm always very happy when I can say to delegates and panelists, I'm going to give you your time back, because we actually had this for another 12 minutes. But, we've got 12 minutes of time, to play with as we bring this event to a fine conclusion. So thank you very much, everyone. It's been an undiluted joy. I wish you all a very, very great weekend ahead. Thank you.